I never believed in premonitions. I always thought that kind of stuff was for people who read too much into things. But that night, something happened that I can't explain. A feeling, an instinct, maybe? Or maybe it was just the universe trying to warn me that things were about to fall apart. All I know is, something felt different when I kissed her goodbye. It wasn't the kiss itself. It was the moment right before. She had that look in her eyes, like there was something she wanted to say, but couldn't, like her mind was somewhere else. I shrugged it off. People get distracted. They have bad days. Have fun, I said. Don't stay out too late. She smiled a little too quickly and said, I won't. Then she grabbed her coat and left. As usual, no indication of what was coming. I hadn't thought much about it until later that night. The party wasn't supposed to be anything special. Maryanne's colleague, Jenna, had invited her. I didn't know most of the people at these events. I'm the kind of guy who prefers staying in. But Maryanne had a way of blending in at these things, talking to everyone, laughing with everyone. I was okay with her going. I trusted her. She had always been honest with me. At least, I thought she was. That night, I sat in the living room, flicking through channels, but my mind was on her. I guess I was waiting for a message or a call, the usual check-in. Nothing. As the hours passed, the unease in my gut grew. Something about her absence felt heavier than normal. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. At around 2:30 a.m., I was pacing. I checked my phone again, no message. I had called her earlier. It went straight to voicemail. This wasn't like her. She'd always been the type to keep in touch. But maybe it was just the late hour, the party was probably still going on, and she didn't want to interrupt the fun. I stood by the window, staring out at the street, waiting for her car. Maybe I was just looking for an excuse to feel better, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The headlights flashed into view a little before 3 a.m. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway was a strange relief, but I noticed something in her posture as she got out of the car. She wasn't walking with her usual confidence. Something was different. When she opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the silence. She didn't greet me with a smile, didn't ask how my night had been. She just stood there for a moment, looking at me. There was no excitement in her eyes, no energy. Hey, how was it? I asked, trying to sound casual, but there was an edge to my voice that even I couldn't explain. Her response was slow, hesitant. It was fine. Just tired. Her tone didn't sit right with me. It wasn't the usual tiredness. It was something else. She went straight to the kitchen, pulled a glass of water, and didn't even offer me one. I try not to read too much into it. She had a long night. Maybe she was just worn out. But then, just as she was about to head up to bed, she paused by the counter where she had dropped her purse. I saw the corner of something shiny peek out from the top. My eyes instinctively went to it, and I froze. There, poking out of her bag, was a ring. It wasn't one of hers. It wasn't a ring I recognized at all. It was a silver band, thin and delicate, with a small, unpolished stone set in the center. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was out of place. The kind of ring you wouldn't expect to find in the purse of someone who had been out for a work gathering. I felt a cold shiver run through me. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her. But as I stood there, I could see the color drain from her face when she noticed I was looking at it. Her hand shot out to quickly close the flap of the purse. Maryanne, I said, my voice shaky. What's that? She looked up at me, her eyes wide. For a moment, there was a complete silence between us. The kind of silence where neither of us knew how to start. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. You don't know what I'm talking about. I repeated, my heart racing now. This ring, Maryanne. What's this ring doing in your purse? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she just stood there, as if she was caught in a lie too big to escape. I could see the panic building in her eyes. It wasn't the kind of panic I had ever seen before. This wasn't just guilt. This was something worse. And that's when I realized, whatever had been going on, I had just uncovered a piece of the truth. The ring wasn't the biggest problem. It was everything that it meant. Who gave you this? I asked quietly, my voice almost a whisper. The question hung in the air like an unspoken threat. She took a deep breath, but the words she spoke were nothing like I expected. I can't explain, she said, her voice cracking. I can't explain. That's when I knew. This was the beginning of something much worse than I had ever imagined. It's funny how your mind works in moments like these. You think you know the person you've shared your life with, but suddenly, a single object, something so small, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, makes everything around you feel like it's cracking. The ring in Maryanne's purse wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol, a sign of something far bigger than I could have ever anticipated. It was like a door I hadn't even known existed, and now it was wide open. I tried to stay calm. I really did. But the truth is, I couldn't help it. The feeling in my chest was growing, this cold, gnawing sense of dread. I had to know. I couldn't just walk away and pretend everything was fine. Who gave you this ring? I asked again, my voice shaky but firm. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Every second that passed, the silence between us grew heavier. Maryanne stood frozen, her eyes wide, her face pale. I could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't trying to hide it. It was right there, in her expression. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a piece of jewelry. I was dealing with a lie that had been carefully constructed, layer by layer, for months, maybe even longer. I can't explain, she said again. But this time, her voice cracked. She stepped back, as if to create some distance between us, but I wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not after seeing that ring. Explain. I repeated, my words coming out sharper than I intended. How can you not explain? Maryanne, you have a ring that isn't mine, in your purse. And I'm supposed to just forget about it? Just let it go? I watched her, desperate for an answer, but she seemed to be lost for words. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding me, avoiding the truth. There was no hiding this. Not anymore. Please, she finally whispered, her voice trembling. Just let it go. Let it go? How could I let it go? Everything I thought I knew about our relationship was starting to unravel in front of my eyes. The woman I had shared my life with, who I trusted implicitly, was hiding something massive, and I had no idea how deep it went. I felt the anger rise in me. Not just anger at her, but at myself too. How had I missed this? How had I ignored all the little signs, the little inconsistencies that had been building up over time? The late nights, the secretive behavior, the way she always seemed just a little too distracted. It was all adding up now, and the picture it was painting wasn't a pretty one. Who gave you the ring? I demanded again, my voice no longer calm. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt guilty for pushing her. But then I remembered the ring, and the way she had tried to hide it. No, I couldn't stop now. I needed answers. I don't want to hurt you, she said, her voice barely audible. I never wanted this to happen. My chest tightened. What do you mean? What's going on, Maryanne? She took a deep breath and seemed to steady herself, as if bracing for the worst. It's not what you think. I watched her, waiting for her to continue. She swallowed hard and finally spoke, but her words came out in a rush, as if she was afraid of them escaping her all at once. There's someone else, she blurted out. The world seemed to stop in that moment. The air in the room thickened, and I could barely breathe. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. What do you mean, someone else? I didn't want to hurt you, she repeated, her voice shaking. But I met someone. At work. It just happened. I didn't plan for it, I swear. It was a mistake. But it happened. The room spun around me, and for a moment, I couldn't process what she was saying. Someone else. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something that just happened. I had trusted her. I had built my life around her. And now, here she was, telling me that she had been seeing someone else behind my back. The silence between us stretched on, unbearable. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. I had so many questions, but none of them felt like they mattered anymore. The most important one kept echoing in my mind. How long had this been going on? How long? I managed to croak. How long has this been happening? She looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. A few months, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to get this far. It just happened. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, like I was going to collapse right then and there. My whole world had just shattered, and I didn't know how to hold it together anymore. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part came next. The ring, I said, my voice cracking as I pointed to the silver band in her purse. Who gave you the ring? Her eyes flickered for a second, and then she sighed, as if the weight of her next words was too much to bear. It's his, she admitted softly. The man I've been seeing. I felt the floor beneath me tilt, my legs barely holding me up. His ring? She had been wearing his ring? The man she had been cheating on me with had given her that ring. The same man who had taken my place in her life, in her heart. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do anything to make the pain stop. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her, completely numb. The person I thought I knew, the person I had spent years with, was someone else entirely. And I didn't know who she was anymore. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We barely spoke. She tried to explain herself, but I couldn't hear her. Every word she said felt like it was coming from a distant place, far away from the anger and confusion that was consuming me. Eventually, she went to bed, but I didn't follow. I couldn't. Not after everything she had told me. I lay awake for hours, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. But no matter how many times I went over it, I couldn't understand how it had come to this. How had I missed all the signs? How had I let it go on for so long? The answers weren't coming. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I even wanted to know the truth anymore. The morning after, I couldn't look at Maryanne. She was in the kitchen, making coffee like it was any other day. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, but there was something bitter in the air that had nothing to do with the drink. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had confessed. Her words kept echoing in my head, like a loop I couldn't escape. A few months, she said. I didn't mean for it to happen. But those were just words, and words could mean anything. It was the silence between them, the things she wasn't saying, that haunted me. I stood there in the hallway for what felt like an eternity, watching her move through the motions of her day, her back turned to me, not even acknowledging that everything had shifted. She had broken something inside me, but it wasn't just the affair. No, it was how easily it all seemed to come together in her mind, how quickly she slipped into this new life without ever letting me know. My world was falling apart, and she hadn't even looked back. I walked into the kitchen, trying to steady my breathing. Maryanne, my voice caught. I wasn't sure what I was even going to say, but I needed to say something. She paused, turning to face me. There was a softness in her eyes, but it was the kind of softness that made me want to scream. It was the softness of someone who had already made peace with the destruction they'd caused. I don't know what you want from me right now, she said quietly. I've already told you the truth. I've been honest. Honest? She had been honest? The woman I thought I knew had just admitted to months of lying, sneaking around, and deceiving me, and she thought that honesty would fix it all. I couldn't even process it. The truth. I snapped, my voice rising. You think this is the truth? That ring in your purse? The man who gave it to you? That's the truth? She flinched at the sound of my voice, but I couldn't stop. How long? How long were you going to keep this up? Were you just waiting for me to figure it out on my own? Because let me tell you, I had no idea. I was blind, completely blind to all of this. What else have you been hiding, Maryanne? She didn't answer right away. For a moment, I thought maybe she wasn't going to answer at all. But then she sighed, walking toward the counter and leaning against it. I didn't want to hurt you, she said again, like a broken record. I didn't want this to happen. I felt the rage bubbling up inside me. Didn't want this to happen? You don't just fall into an affair by accident. You don't just slip into someone else's arms without a reason. Then why did it happen? I demanded. Why? What's wrong with us? With me? Was I not good enough for you? Or was it just something you wanted to do? She took a deep breath and finally met my eyes. It wasn't about you, she said softly. It was about me. I was unhappy, and I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed. I stared at her, trying to process the words. Unhappy? She had everything. A husband who loved her, a home, a family. I had done everything I could to make her feel secure, to make sure she was happy. But apparently, it wasn't enough. She needed something else. Someone else. Her voice was so quiet, so fragile as she spoke again. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was a mistake, a stupid, stupid mistake. But when I met him, it felt like something I had been missing for so long. And I didn't know how to stop it once it started. I could feel the anger in my chest burning hotter with every word she said. So what? You just decided I wasn't enough? You didn't come to me, didn't talk to me, just jumped into bed with someone else? Maryanne shook her head. No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't about just being with him. It was about feeling alive again. Feeling something different, something I hadn't felt in a long time. You know how it is, right? When you feel like you're just going through the motions, just doing what's expected of you. I wanted something more than that. I needed something more. I felt a surge of pain. That's what it was. It wasn't about me, about us. It was about her needing something more. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The thought of her with someone else, someone I didn't even know, was like a knife twisting in my gut. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what to say anymore. What was there left to say? She had already admitted it. I was standing there, in my own kitchen, in my own home, and she was telling me everything that had been going on behind my back. I had lived my life in a lie, and I had no idea how I was supposed to move forward from this. You need to leave, I said finally, my voice hoarse. I didn't want to say it, didn't want to hear the words come out of my mouth, but I knew it was the only thing left to do. If I didn't say it, I would be stuck in this miserable limbo, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Maryanne's face crumpled. For the first time, I saw a real emotion in her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, but something deeper. Regret, maybe. Pain. Please don't say that, she whispered, stepping toward me. But I couldn't let her get any closer. Not now. No, I said, my voice stronger this time. I need you to leave. I need to think. I can't do this with you here. She hesitated, looking at me as if she was waiting for some sign, some glimmer of hope. But all I could feel was this crushing weight pressing down on me. The life I had built, the trust one had given her, it was all crumbling before my eyes. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't live with someone who had lied to me, who had betrayed me so deeply. I'll pack my things, she said quietly, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. I watched her walk away, and for the first time in years, I didn't know who she was anymore. And worse, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. How could I have let this happen? How could I have missed everything she had been hiding? The door closed behind her, and I was left standing there, alone, in a house that no longer felt like home. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how I would rebuild, or if I even could. But one thing was certain, everything had changed. And the man who walked out of this house today would never be the same man who walked in. The door closed behind her with a quiet thud, and it was as though the whole house exhaled. The silence that followed was suffocating, like the air had become too thick to breathe. Maryanne was gone. She hadn't taken much, just a bag, her car keys, and a few clothes. It seemed almost too easy, like she was as ready to leave as I was to make her go. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for any of this. I stood there, alone in the dimly lit kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do anything to make the weight in my chest disappear, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. It was like my mind had shut down. I stared at the coffee cup she had left behind on the counter, the liquid inside now cold. The ring. I still couldn't stop thinking about it. The silver band with the unpolished stone. It was sitting in the drawer where she'd left it, a quiet reminder of everything she had kept hidden from me. I had thought I knew her better than anyone. But now, I was starting to realize how little I really knew. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling. I had never felt this level of confusion in my life. The shock from her confession still hadn't worn off. She hadn't just been seeing someone else. No, it wasn't just that. It was everything. It was the lies, the way she had carried on, the way she had made me think everything was fine when it wasn't. I kept going over the details, trying to piece together the past few months, trying to find the cracks I had missed. But there were no cracks. There were only lies, neatly tucked away, wrapped in a story that she had crafted with such precision. I thought back to the days leading up to her confession. The little things that should have stood out, but didn't. The late nights at work, the phone calls she always took in private, the way she would suddenly become distant, as if she was somewhere else entirely. How could I have been so blind? She had changed, and I had missed it. I had missed it all. The worst part? I wasn't sure if I was angry at her or at myself. I didn't want to hate her. I didn't want to believe that everything we had built together was a lie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had all been a facade. She had told me she was unhappy, that she needed something more. But wasn't that what we were supposed to do together? Weren't we supposed to face the tough times together, to talk about things? I thought that was what marriage was. But apparently, it wasn't enough for her. My mind kept wandering back to the man she had been seeing, the one who had given her the ring. What kind of man was he? What did he offer her that I didn't? Was he everything I wasn't? The questions burned through my brain, each one more painful than the last. I hadn't even asked her his name. Part of me didn't want to know. Another part of me wanted to hunt him down, to find him, to confront him, to demand answers. But what good would that do? What was I looking for anyway? What could he possibly say that would make this situation any better? There was no redemption in this. I spent the next few hours wandering through the house, doing nothing but pacing. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't even tired. I just couldn't sit still. Every room I entered felt like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The living room, where we'd watched movies together for years. The bedroom, where we'd once held each other close, whispered our secrets into the night. Now, they were nothing but empty spaces, places where memories had turned into ghosts. The phone sat on the kitchen counter, buzzing every now and then with text messages I wasn't ready to read. They were from her. I knew they were, but I couldn't bring myself to open them. What was she going to say? She had already told me everything I needed to hear. The truth, as painful as it was, had already come out. I didn't need to hear any more lies. The next day, I found myself sitting in front of my computer, staring at the screen with no real purpose. My mind was still reeling from the night before, from her words. But there was something else gnawing at me, something I couldn't shake. The ring. I kept coming back to it, to the man who had given it to her, to the secrecy that surrounded it. I needed to know more, but what was I even looking for? The truth? Or just something to make me feel better? I wasn't sure anymore. I thought about calling my friends, asking for advice, or maybe just someone to talk to. But I didn't want to hear their judgment. What could they possibly say that would make this better? Just move on, they'd tell me. She's not worth it. But it wasn't that simple, was it? For years, I had thought we had everything. We were the couple that people looked at and said, they have it all. But now, I felt like I had nothing. I didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't know who I was anymore. The person I thought I knew was gone, and I was left with nothing but the remnants of a relationship that had been built on secrets. As the days passed, I started to drift through my life in a haze. I went through the motions, but nothing felt real. Nothing felt like it mattered. I kept telling myself that I needed to move on, that I needed to rebuild my life. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back at me. Who was I without her? I thought about the ring again. There was something unsettling about it. It wasn't just a symbol of her betrayal. It was a reminder of how little I really knew about her. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about what it meant. And deep down, I knew I had to find out more. If I didn't, I'd never be able to let this go. So, I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I went through her things. I knew it was wrong, but I had to know. I had to find something, anything, that could explain what had happened, that could explain the man who had taken my place. I went into the bedroom, pulled open the drawer where she kept her jewelry, and there it was, the ring, sitting on top of a few other pieces. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the inside of the band, there was an engraving. I squinted, trying to make it out. It was so small, almost hidden, but there it was, etched into the metal. 2 initials. I didn't recognize them. My heart raced. I didn't know what this meant, but I knew I had to find out. And that would be the beginning of something I couldn't turn back from. The engraving on the inside of the ring sent a shiver through me, a cold, sharp reminder that I had been living a lie. 2 initials. I didn't recognize them. It was like a puzzle piece that didn't fit, a clue that raised more questions than it answered. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, turning the ring over in my hands as if expecting it to reveal some hidden truth, some secret that would make everything make sense. But it didn't. The initials remained stubbornly unfamiliar, their meaning slipping further from my grasp the more I tried to understand. I could feel the pull of curiosity deep within me, a force I couldn't ignore. I needed to know. Who was he? The man behind the ring. The one who had taken her from me, who had made her forget about the life we had built together. What kind of man was he? What had he done to make her risk everything? I couldn't sit still. The questions burned inside me like fire, consuming my thoughts, making it impossible to focus on anything else. I placed the ring carefully on the counter and grabbed my jacket, the weight of it pressing down on me like I was about to step into a storm. I didn't know what I was hoping to find, but I knew I had to find something. Anything. To answer the questions that were clawing at my mind. To make sense of the mess that had become my life. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city blurring past in the darkness. The streets were empty at this hour, the quiet punctuated only by the sound of my tires on the pavement. I didn't have a destination, but I knew I couldn't go back home yet. Not with the unanswered questions eating away at me. Not with the feeling that I was still in the dark about everything that had happened. Eventually, I found myself outside a small cafe. It wasn't much, just a hole-in-the-wall place, tucked away between a couple of bars, the kind of spot that no one paid much attention to. But as I stood there, looking through the foggy windows, something clicked. I didn't know why, but it felt like the right place to start. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth of the cafe hit me immediately, and for a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. The low hum of conversation, the clink of mugs, the faint sound of a jazz song playing in the background. It was nothing like the chaos in my head, and for a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. But then I spotted him. He was sitting alone at a table near the back, his face half hidden in the shadows. He was older than me, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair that had been neatly styled. His posture was relaxed, but there was an intensity to the way he sat, as if he was always aware of everything happening around him. His eyes were scanning the room, moving from person to person, but when they landed on me, they lingered a moment longer than they should have. For a brief second, I wondered if he had recognized me. But there was no recognition in his eyes, no sign that he knew who I was. He was just another face in the crowd, someone who didn't belong to my world but somehow had found his way into it. I stood frozen, the weight of what I was about to do settling in my chest. What was I even doing here? Why was I about to approach this stranger who had no idea what he was about to walk into? But I couldn't turn back now. The questions needed answers. I walked to the counter and ordered a coffee, trying to act casual, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. But all I could think about was Maryanne. The ring. The initials. I took a deep breath and walked over to his table. His eyes flickered to me as I approached, and I saw the flicker of recognition flash across his face. He didn't smile, didn't greet me. He simply looked up at me, waiting for me to speak. "Excuse me." I began, my voice rough, the words coming out in a way I hadn't planned. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I need to ask you something." He didn't say anything right away, but there was a glint of curiosity in his eyes. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't nervous. He was calm. Too calm. "Go ahead," he said, his voice smooth and steady. I hesitated for a moment, the question catching in my throat. I didn't know how to ask this. I didn't know how to make sense of what I was about to demand. But I had to know. "I'm looking for someone," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "A man. He's been with my wife. I'm sure you don't know me, but I think you know her." His eyes narrowed, his expression not changing. "What makes you think I know her?" I felt a rush of heat in my chest. I wasn't sure where the words were coming from, but I couldn't stop them now. "She's been seeing someone behind my back." I found a ring. A silver ring, with initials on the inside. I paused, studying his face for any hint of recognition. "I think it's yours." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. His gaze didn't shift, but I could feel the tension rising between us. For a moment, I thought he was going to deny it, that he was going to lie, tell me I was crazy. But instead, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the table as if he were considering his next move. "Do you want to know the truth?" he asked, his voice low, almost too calm. I didn't know how to respond. Of course, I wanted the truth. I wanted to know everything. But somehow, I was afraid of what he might say. "Yes," I said, barely above a whisper. "I need to know." He took a deep breath, his eyes finally softening just a fraction. "It's complicated," he said, his words hanging in the air like a warning. "But the truth is, your wife and I have been involved for longer than you think." And just like that, everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I had understood, came crashing down. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Involved. It was such a cold, sterile way of putting it. But there it was. The man sitting across from me wasn't some stranger. He wasn't just some mistake Maryanne had made. He was something else. He had been a part of her life for longer than I could have imagined, a part one had never suspected, not even for a moment. It was the kind of revelation that felt like the floor had just dropped out from beneath me, and for a brief second, I couldn't breathe. I blinked, trying to process his words. "How long?" I managed to croak, the question escaping my lips before I could even fully think it through. I needed to know. I had to know how long my wife had been living this double life, how much of my reality had been a lie. But deep down, I was already afraid of the answer. What if it had been years? What if everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was just one big illusion? He didn't hesitate, just leaned forward slightly, his hands still resting on the table, his fingers tapping rhythmically as if he had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times before. His eyes never left mine, steady and calm. "It started about a year ago," he said quietly. We didn't plan for it. It wasn't supposed to happen. But once it did, it couldn't be stopped. A year. I froze, the words slowly sinking in. A year? My mind couldn't wrap itself around the idea. For a whole year, she had been lying to me. For a whole year, she had been with him, sharing things with him she should have been sharing with me. A whole year of hidden texts, secret meetings, stolen moments. I could feel the blood rushing to my ears, my heart pounding faster, my hands shaking in disbelief. What do you mean, it wasn't supposed to happen? I shot back, the anger in my voice rising now. You think I care about how it started? You think I care about your excuses? You've been sleeping with my wife for a year, and now you're sitting here, telling me it wasn't supposed to happen? What kind of man are you? He didn't flinch at all. There was no guilt, no remorse in his eyes. Just cold detachment, like he was observing a scene that didn't belong to him. I never intended to hurt you, he said, his voice low, almost as if he were explaining something to a child. But the truth is, we were both stuck. Your wife was unhappy, and I wasn't going to just sit back and watch her fade away. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to stand up, flip the table, tear him apart with my bare hands. But all I could do was sit there, paralyzed, as the weight of his words settled over me like a suffocating blanket. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even ashamed. He was justifying it. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. He was rationalizing it as if he were some kind of savior, rescuing her from a life that I had no idea was falling apart. You think I didn't notice? I asked, my voice trembling. You think I didn't see the signs? The late nights? The way she stopped talking to me? The way she looked at me like I was a stranger? You think I didn't feel something was wrong? He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up at me. People change, he said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. Maryanne changed. You were too wrapped up in your own world to see it. She needed something different. She needed someone who understood her in ways you couldn't. The anger in me was boiling over now, but beneath it, something else was building. Hurt. Confusion. I had spent years with her, shared everything with her, trusted her with my life. And this man, this stranger, had come into our world, taken my place, and had become the person she turned to when things fell apart. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him how he could live with himself. But I couldn't. My throat felt tight, like the words were stuck there, too heavy to speak. What is it that you have? I whispered through clenched teeth. What makes you so special? Why her? Why not someone else? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying me with a detached curiosity, like he was trying to figure out how I was processing this. I can't explain it, he said finally, but I know what I'm offering her. I've always known, and it's something you couldn't give her anymore. My stomach turned. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't just about sex or desire. This was something deeper, something more insidious. It was about her needing something more, something that I hadn't been able to give her. And the worst part? He was right. I had been so wrapped up in the routine, in the comfort of our life together, that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming beneath the surface. I hadn't seen how badly she needed more. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor, and I walked away from him without saying another word. I couldn't listen to him anymore. I couldn't stand sitting there, hearing him justify what he had done, hearing him tell me that he had something I couldn't offer her. He had taken her from me, and there was nothing I could do to undo that. I stepped out into the cold night air, my lungs burning as I breathed deeply, trying to steady my racing heart. The city lights blurred around me, the world spinning in a way I couldn't control. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to think. But the more I tried to shake it off, the more the weight of what I had learned crushed me. Maryanne had been living a double life, and for all the years we spent together, she had never once come to me with her pain. She had never once tried to fix it with me. Instead, she had gone to him. I could still feel the sting of the words he had spoken to me. You were too wrapped up in your own world to see it. The words echoed in my mind like a constant reminder of my failure. I had failed her, and now I had failed myself. But as much as I hated him for what he had done, I hated myself even more. I had been blind to everything, to her needs, to her desires, to the cracks in our marriage that had widened without me even noticing. And now, there was no going back. The city had never felt so cold, so distant, as I walked aimlessly through the streets. My feet moved mechanically, but my mind was far away, lost in the conversation I had just had. That man, the one who had taken my place in Maryanne's life. His words replayed in my head over and over again. You were too wrapped up in your own world to see it. The accusation was sharp, and it stung in a way I couldn't shake. But deep down, I knew there was some truth to it. I had been blind. I had been so sure of everything, so comfortable in the life we had built, that I failed to see the cracks. The slow, steady erosion of everything I thought I knew. I didn't know how much time had passed when I found myself standing outside my house again. The familiar silhouette of the house loomed in front of me, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stranger's house. A place where memories had been tainted, where love had turned into something ugly. I stood there for a long time, staring at the front door, the weight of everything pressing down on me, suffocating me. I had always imagined coming back here after a day of work, after time spent with Maryanne, with the kids. I had imagined us growing old here, making a life together, creating new memories. But now, all I could think of was how much it had all fallen apart. I reached for the door handle, the cold metal biting into my palm, and pushed it open. The sound of it creaking on its hinges felt like a scream in the quiet of the night. Inside, everything was still. Maryanne's things were scattered across the living room. The books she'd been reading, her jacket draped over the couch. But there was no sign of her. No sound of her footsteps, no faint hum of the TV. The emptiness in the house felt suffocating. I stood in the middle of the living room for a moment, the silence pressing in on me from every direction. The house, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt hollow. My gaze wandered to the kitchen, to the place where we used to sit together, talking about everything and nothing, sharing meals, laughing about trivial things. But now, it was just a cold, empty space. I didn't know what I was expecting. For some part of me, a foolish part, had hoped she would be here, waiting for me to come home, ready to explain herself, ready to fix things. But I knew that was a dream. The reality was far different. Maryanne had made her choice. She had already moved on, in ways that I could no longer reach. I walked up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Our bedroom door was slightly ajar. I could see the faint light from the bedside lamp spilling out into the hallway. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the doorframe, trying to gather the courage to go inside. But what was left to say? What was left to ask? I pushed the door open. The room felt colder than usual, the sheets still unmade from when she had left this morning. Her side of the bed was empty. She had taken everything. Her clothes, her things, the pieces of her life that she had left behind when she decided to walk away. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my fingers brushing over the fabric of the sheets. They were still warm, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. The warmth was gone. Everything she had promised me, the love, the commitment, the future, was just a memory now. I stood up abruptly, feeling like I couldn't breathe in here anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and the more I thought about what had happened, the more I felt like I was losing control. The pain in my chest was unbearable, like a physical wound that wouldn't heal. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. The lies, the secrecy, the years I had spent thinking that I knew everything about her, about us, and now realizing I didn't know a damn thing. My gaze landed on her nightstand, and I saw the small, leather-bound notebook she kept there. I had never really paid attention to it before. It was just one of those things that blended into the background. But now, for some reason, I couldn't look away. The notebook seemed like the last piece of her I hadn't touched, the last thread of intimacy that we had shared. I picked it up carefully, my hands shaking as I flipped it open. The pages were filled with her handwriting, notes, thoughts, fragments of her life that she had kept hidden from me. It was almost like reading someone else's diary, and as I scanned through the words, I could feel the rawness of her emotions, the frustration, the confusion, and yes, even the desire. It was all there, things I had never known, things she had never told me. And then I saw it. The name, the initials, the same initials that had been engraved inside the ring. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, my mind stopped spinning. The man she had been seeing wasn't just some random affair. He wasn't just some rebound. He was someone who had been close to her, someone she had shared more with than I could have ever imagined. The name on the page matched the initials inside the ring. I sat down heavily on the bed, the weight of it crashing down on me. I had thought I had reached the bottom. I had thought the truth couldn't hurt any more than it already had. But now, this was worse. Now, it wasn't just about the affair. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't been able to see, something that had been hiding in plain sight. The connection between them wasn't just physical. It was emotional. And that made it feel like a betrayal I couldn't even begin to understand. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know how to move forward from here. The house felt like a prison, and I felt like I was trapped inside it. I stood up, pacing the room, my mind racing. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream at her. But I knew that wouldn't do anything. The damage was done. She had already made her choice. I thought about calling her, about reaching out to her and demanding answers, but I knew it was pointless. She had already made her decision. The woman I had known, the woman I had trusted, was gone. What remained was a stranger who had taken everything I held dear and walked away without a second glance. I walked over to the window and stared out into the night. The city lights flickered below, but they felt distant, like they belonged to a world I no longer had access to. I was alone now, completely alone. And the worst part? I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with the pieces of this broken life. There was no going back. There was no fixing it. All I had left was the pain, the memories, and the haunting question of how it had all gone so wrong. The next few days were a blur. I spent my time alone in the house, pacing, reflecting, and trying to piece together the fragments of my life that had been shattered in such a short amount of time. At first, all I could do was relive every moment, every conversation, every red flag I had ignored. But over time, the shock started to wear off, and a different kind of clarity began to settle in. I wasn't sure when it happened, but I finally realized something important. I couldn't keep living in the past. The anger and the hurt, they were still there, deep in my chest, but they didn't define me anymore. They didn't get to control my life. I had spent so much of my energy focusing on the things I couldn't change, on the way Maryanne had betrayed me, on the life I thought I had built, that I had lost sight of what really mattered. And that was me. I had been so wrapped up in my relationship with her, in the pain of losing her, that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had neglected my own dreams, my own passions, my own happiness. But now it was time to change that. I didn't need Maryanne to validate me. I didn't need her to make me feel whole. I needed to find that within myself. The first step was the hardest. I decided to move out of the house. It wasn't that I wanted to leave everything behind, but I needed space to breathe, to clear my mind. I rented a small apartment on the other side of the city, quiet, simple, and free of the memories that had once filled my home. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The days turned into weeks, and I slowly began to rebuild my life. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I started doing things for myself, things I had pushed aside in the name of stability. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. I dusted off the guitar I had left in the corner of my room and began playing again, finding comfort in the music. It felt like a reclamation of my own identity, a reminder that I was still here, still capable of finding joy in the little things. I focused on my work, something I had always been passionate about, but had put on the back burner. My career flourished as I threw myself into it, and I started to feel a sense of pride in my achievements again. It wasn't all easy. There were days when the loneliness crept back in, when I felt the weight of the past crashing down on me. But with every step forward, with every moment of peace I found, I realized that I was healing. Slowly, but surely, I was putting the pieces of myself back together. And then, one day it happened. I bumped into Maryanne. I was out for a walk, just enjoying the afternoon sunshine, when I saw her walking towards me. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel the old pain or anger. I just saw her, someone who had once been an important part of my life. We stood there for a moment, looking at each other, both unsure of what to say. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said softly, breaking the silence. I nodded. I didn't either. We stood there in an awkward silence for a moment, both of us unsure of what to do next. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. Not a forced smile, not one full of resentment or bitterness, but a genuine smile. A smile that said, "I've moved on, and so have you." "I hope you're doing well," I said quietly. "I really do." Her eyes softened. "I am. I've made some changes too." We both knew what that meant, but there was no more pain in it. No more bitterness. just an understanding that we had both been through something difficult and that we were both moving forward in our own way. She smiled back at me. "Take care of yourself." "I will," I replied, and with that, I turned and walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. As I walked down the street, I felt the weight of the past finally begin to lift. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I had found peace, and I had found it on my own. I was no longer defined by the hurt or the betrayal. I was defined by my ability to heal, to grow, and to move forward. And that was enough. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about it. I didn't know what came next, but I knew that whatever it was, I was ready for it. I had finally learned that happiness didn't depend on anyone else. It depended on me. And with that realization, I stepped into the next chapter of my life, stronger, wiser, and ready to take on whatever came my way.